his people. Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia.
The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Jesus went across the Sea of Galilee. Jesus went up on the mountain, and there he sat down with his disciples. The Jewish feast of Passover was near. When Jesus raised his eyes and saw that a large crowd was coming to him, he said to Philip, "So where can we buy enough food for them to eat?" He said this to test him, because he himself knew what he was going to do. Philip answered him, 200 days' wages worth of food would not be enough for each of them to have a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, the brother of Simon Peter, said to him, "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, but what good are these for so many?" Jesus said, "Have the people recline." Now there was a great deal of grass in that place, so the men reclined, about 5,000 in number. Then Jesus took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed them to those who were reclining, and also as much of the fish as they wanted. When they had had their fill, he said to his disciples, "Gather the fragments left over so that nothing will be wasted." So they collected them and filled the 12 wicker baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves that had been more than they could eat. When the people saw the sign he had done, they said, "This is truly the prophet, the one who is to come into the world." Since Jesus knew that they were going to come and carry him off to make him king, he withdrew again to the mountain alone. The Gospel of the Lord. The Gospel comes from chapter 6 of St. John's Gospel, the beginning of the whole Bread of Life discourse. And here at the beginning, we have the story of one boy with 5 loaves and 2 fish, who essentially, with the help of Jesus, of course, but one boy who feeds 5,000 men, plus the women and children who are there. Something that not even Andrew, who's the brother of Simon Peter, doesn't even appreciate. There's a boy here, he only has 5 loaves and 2 fish, but what good is that? This is all he has to offer, but it's no good for such a crowd so large. And so it's the boy with the help of Jesus, because Jesus knows that what the boy has to offer is plenty. With God's help, the Lord multiplies the fish and the loaves of bread. Everybody eats, thousands and thousands of people, and there's even food left over at the end. So in some sense, one boy, the little bit that he has to offer, what he brings to Jesus is enough to feed 5,000 and more people. Since last August, in the Diocese of San Bernardino, we've been in the middle of the Year for Youth, as declared by Bishop Gerald Barnes last August. And during this year, I've been focusing more on youth, by which we mean high school age people, young people. Focus more on them and what they do and our appreciation for them as well. The Year for Youth will end next Sunday, August 5th, with some celebrations and a Mass at Xavier High School in Palm Desert. But good for us to make sure that our prayers for youth, our appreciation of youth, is something that continues well beyond next Sunday. And so maybe since this Year for Youth is coming to an end in our diocese, look for maybe some of the lessons that we've learned, some of the ways that we incorporate those lessons into our lives, I think in order to see and to appreciate, and even at times to be led by young people in our own journey of faith. So maybe we do that in maybe 3 ways. One is, I think, recognizing that youth have great faith, and that's just a fact. Sometimes it's as strong as my faith, or maybe your faith also, and that we as adults don't always see that faith, or really we don't always appreciate it. Sometimes we'll stereotype youth like we might other groups of people, but sometimes they're stereotyped as having no faith or very little faith, or inconsistent in their faith. And again, maybe that's true at times, but probably no more so true for them than it is for us. Sometimes we waver in our faith as well. But young people have great faith. We can't say to them, you have no faith whatsoever. They often come to church on their own, or they'll pray on their own, read the Bible on their own, and actually oftentimes volunteer their time in charities. This past year, in May, was the first year our diocese gave awards also to youth, to young people, something that will continue in the future. And the leadership of the diocese was very impressed with just how involved young people are in charitable organizations, not just in their parishes, but being involved in organizations in the civil community, the city community as well. Young people do have great faith, and it's good for us to see that and to appreciate it. So maybe one of the ideas for reflection for this Sunday and beyond is where do you see faith in youth, the youth that you know, whether they're in your family or ones around the corner, or the ones here at the parish, but where do you see great faith in the youth that you know? Secondly, good for us to realize that at times, young people bring adults to greater faith in God and in the church. Sometimes it's through First Communion or confirmation, when parents may not be going to church so much, but because their child needs a sacrament, they start coming back because of the requirement, in a sense, to do so. But other times, too, I think, young people, by their example, by their goodness, by their prayer, and oftentimes by their questions, bring adults back to the faith. So where have you been led by young people to bring you to greater faith in God and the church? Or are you even open to the idea that a young person could teach you something about faith, about the spiritual life? Or are you just closed to that idea? Nobody that age can teach me anything when it comes to faith. Are you open to that idea? Can you see that in your own life? Then finally, to realize that young people have much to offer us when it comes to faith. Just like the boy in the gospel today, young people have something to offer us adults too. Even if it's something that's small and that's little, the Lord works with them, and we can learn much from young people. Bishop Barnes, in his letter on the Year for Youth, writes, "Young people are genuine and direct. They ask about many of the big issues facing the church: homosexuality, marriage, race relations, vocations to the priesthood and to married life. They have a curiosity and an energy to talk about these matters out of the experience of their generation. They also want to understand how to view them as young Catholics. Rather than fear this discussion, we might see it as prophetic. God has put on the hearts of our youth questions that warrant prayer and reflection for all of us." Sometimes those are issues or discussions that adults fear to have with young people. When the kids have questions, whatever the questions might be, they're easy to dismiss, right? We can say, because I said so, that's why, right? Or I don't talk about this right now. Do things because I said this is the way it is, that's enough. But when they get to be 16, 18 years old, that doesn't work anymore, does it? You can't say because I said so, or that's just the way it is. The questions deserve answers, reasonable answers. And so sometimes they have something to offer us in learning more about our faith, or what our church teaches about certain things, certain issues in the social arena, that we can actually learn something more about our faith and the practice of our faith, based oftentimes on their questions and their opinions and their disagreements. See, it's not right for us to adopt the attitude of Andrew in the gospel. What good is that? So what good is your opinion as a young person on religion or on social issues or on politics? What good is your opinion? So what good are your views on the church? What good are your prayers? What good is your faith? And what good are the feelings you have about certain things? I think sometimes as adults we can cut off youth, and that's the attitude, the perception that we give, that you have nothing to offer us. That you have nothing to offer our family, you have nothing to offer our church until you grow up. And the only thing you have to offer now is your obedience. So just do what I tell you to do and think the way that I think. And yet young people don't, and nobody has to think exactly the way that we think, right? People have their different opinions on things. And so I think it's good for us to see that for young people, they challenge us in many ways, and instead of being afraid of those discussions, those kind of topics and sometimes their questions and their differences of opinion are opportunities for us to reflect more on our own faith. So maybe to look at a little bit too, where the young people in your life challenge you to learn more about your faith and to grow in your relationship with Jesus. At the end of his letter, Bishop Barnes writes, "Our challenge then, as Catholic adults, is to understand the dual need for us to instruct and guide our youth in their faith journey, while also giving wings to their gifts and insights." And that's really the challenge, isn't it? As adults, we want to instruct youth because there are things that are right and wrong. There are values and morals in life, things that are non-negotiable. So we want to teach and instruct and guide in the ways of faith on one hand. On the other hand, we don't want to close down discussions, even discussions and disagreements and differences of opinion that are born of faith, or their different views on things as well. So how do we as adults guide and instruct, while at the same time giving wings to their gifts and their insights, their energies, their enthusiasm, their ideals? Because young people are often very idealistic, aren't they? Ready to solve the problems of the world, to eliminate world hunger and create world peace, always ready to and energetic to do those kinds of things. And it's good for us not to squash those kinds of ideas. It's a challenge for us to guide and to instruct, while at the same time allowing them to have their own feelings, their own opinions on different issues as well. On this, as the year for youth in our diocese comes to a close, we're very mindful of Christ's interaction in the gospel, and that of Andrew as well. Jesus can accept and receive what comes from the young person. He can see it as sufficient. He can work with that. Whereas Andrew cannot see that there's anything the boy has to offer Jesus or the whole group of people. Maybe for us then, we're called to reflect this Sunday and beyond just on those three different ideas. That where do you see faith in the youth that you know? Are you open to the idea of young people leading you and guiding you and teaching you something new when it comes to faith and the Catholic Church and your relationship with God? And then finally, to look at as well, can you see faith in young people and affirm it? Can you say, yes, you do have something to offer our church, you have something to offer our family, you have something to offer our society. Your opinions, your thoughts, your ideas are valuable and important, and to affirm young people as such. We ask God's blessings upon especially the young people of our diocese during this week and the years that come ahead too, that they may always receive the gift of faith from God, and they may put that faith into practice in their church and in their families.